Can you give us your definition of Christian nationalism? Like, it's a term that a lot of us have thought about and worried about. Doesn't seem like very many people self-identify with it. Like, it's hard to find people who go around saying, like, I am a Christian nationalist. It feels like it's a description of a set of beliefs and behaviors more than a self-identifying perspective. But I'm wondering about your thoughts on that. How do you talk about it, and how do you explain the issue of Christian nationalism and the topic of Christian nationalism?
I think that's really a vital point because we should have a common understanding about what we're talking about as far as Christian nationalism goes. And I'm going to point to the statement that's available at christiansagainstchristiannationalism.org. The work that we did back in 2019 was about providing an advocacy platform for people who were interested in learning more and for taking a public stand. And the centerpiece of the project is a statement. And in the statement itself, we define Christian nationalism as a political ideology that seeks to merge our identities as Americans and Christians. So a few things here. One, we are specifically talking in the American context. This is something that comes up. This is not particular to the United States, but in our work, we are really focusing on the American expression of Christian nationalism. And so we talk explicitly about American and Christian identities. But we also want to distinguish that Christian nationalism is not Christianity. Christian nationalism is a political ideology. Christianity is a religion. That said, you can't totally divorce Christianity out of it.
Okay.
It'd be great just to say, oh, this has nothing to do with Christianity.
Yeah.
That would be really easy, right? That's not accurate. And that's because Christian nationalism uses the narratives and the symbols, and in some cases, even the theology of Christianity to further this political ideology. But as we define Christian nationalism, it is not itself a religion. It is more about identity than religion in a lot of ways. And we get at this in one of our resources that we have available at Christians Against Christian Nationalism, a really handy one-pager that your guests last week, Andrew Whitehead and Samuel Perry, helped us put together called What is Christian Nationalism? And we talk about how it's more identity than religion. When we define Christian nationalism, I think it's also important to say what it's not. It's not patriotism. Patriotism is a love of country, and we can show our love of country in a number of different ways. We can wave an American flag, we can protest in the streets, we can exercise our constitutional rights, right? These are all different ways to be patriotic. Nationalism is a love of country that also requires an allegiance to it above everything else, including our theological views. And so when our theological view, when our patriotism starts to ask us to sacrifice our theological views, that's no longer patriotism. That's nationalism. And particularly as we're talking about here, Christian nationalism.
It really does seem like there's a lot of people who believe, as a matter of fact, that this was founded as a Christian nation with intent for a Christian community to express the desire and will of God in the world. Like, I don't know. I hear that so often from people who I think would feel totally bothered by the fact that that would be Christian nationalism. They think it's just history. They think it's just a proper description, of how the world came together. Can you talk a little bit about how do you make sense out of the history that so many people have been taught? Maybe it was in Sunday school or school or homeschool or somewhere along the line. They just picked up from, I don't know, the Pilgrims forward, that there were a bunch of religious freedom seekers that came to America to establish freedom from a oppressive government, and that was God's call, and the United States of America has a unique place, and they just view the world through God's lens, and they think God has given the people of Christian faith this land, and we should be gracious to everyone. But, it was kind of a Judeo-Christian place. How do you even begin to unravel that when that doesn't feel like a choice people are making or an ideology they're picking? They feel like it's history. What advice
Yeah.
do you have for people trying to, make some better sense out of all that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for one, just engaging in conversation and not taking some of this history, and sometimes I'll put that in air quotes, right? History as fact, right? You can cherry pick any kind of history of the United States. You can take different anecdotes about certain founders or constitutional framers' own religious views. You can construct a narrative as some of these Christian nationalists like David Barton have done in the past. David Barton is someone who has spent decades writing this history of the United States as a Christian nation. And a lot of this, as you said, gets into some of these curricula that homeschools and others use in order to teach this history. You can cherry pick that history. And you could spend your time kind of going anecdote for anecdote or quote
Yeah.
for quote. I don't often think that that's really a productive way to do it. And so instead, and again, I'm a lawyer, and I lead this advocacy group about religious freedom for all. So I go to our founding documents and I go to the US Constitution itself. And religion or religious is mentioned exactly once in the original US Constitution from 1787 in Article 6, where there says there will be no religious test for public office. And so I say, if our founders really wanted to set up a Christian nation, this was a really ineffective way to do it. To say from the beginning
Mm,
that there would be no religious test
sure.
for public office. And then you can go to the First Amendment, of course, that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. But if you are saying at the very first amendment to the US Constitution that we are not going to establish a religion, there shall be no law respecting an establishment of religion, again, you're not setting up a Christian nation when it comes to the laws and the structure of our government itself. It was never meant, however, for there to be a total a divorcement of religion from the public square. Far from it. But as far as our government itself, our government was set up as a secular government, not one that was meant to put forward to promote one particular religion over others, or even religion over irreligion. It was set up as a secular government. I think that that's a much stronger way to kind of debate that point